In the shadows of history, there's a figure so shrouded in darkness, his name has become synonymous with terror. He's the inspiration behind the most iconic vampire in literature, and yet, the truth about his life is far more sinister than any fiction. Welcome to the story of Vlad the Impaler, the man who would become the legend. Vlad's name is whispered in fear and fascination, a figure of legend and myth. But who was the real Vlad? Was he a monster, a tyrant, or a hero who fought against the odds? The answers lie in the shadows of history, where the truth is often distorted and the lines between fact and fiction are blurred. As we delve into the life and times of Vlad the Impaler, we'll explore the dark and twisted world of 15th century Wallachia, a land of blood and fire, where the stakes were always high and the price of power was often paid in blood. We'll examine the events that shaped Vlad's life, from his childhood to his rise to power, and the brutal methods he used to maintain his grip on the throne. From the Ottoman Empire's expansion into Eastern Europe to the intrigue and politics of the royal courts, we'll uncover the complex web of alliances and rivalries that defined Vlad's world. We'll also explore the legends and myths that have grown up around his name, and separate fact from fiction in the story of the man who would become the inspiration for Count Dracula. So, join me on this journey into the heart of darkness, as we uncover the truth about Vlad the Impaler, the man behind the legend. It's a story of power, politics, and bloodlust, of a man who would stop at nothing to achieve his goals, and the legacy that has endured for centuries. Born in 1431, Vlad III was a member of the noble house of Draculesti, a family with a long history of producing fierce warriors and cunning politicians. From a young age, Vlad was groomed for leadership, but his path to power would be paved with blood and betrayal. Vlad's father, Vlad II Dracul, was a member of the Order of the Dragon, a chivalric order dedicated to fighting the Ottoman Empire. But when Vlad's enemies accused his father of treachery, the young prince was taken hostage by the Ottomans. This would be the beginning of Vlad's descent into darkness. The Ottoman Empire was a force to be reckoned with in the 15th century. They had already conquered much of Eastern Europe, and their armies were feared across the continent. Vlad's father, Vlad II Dracul, had been a key player in the resistance against the Ottomans, but his loyalty was tested when he was forced to pay tribute to the Sultan. The young Vlad was caught in the middle of this complex web of politics and power struggles. As a hostage, he was forced to witness the brutal treatment of his people, and the cruelty of the Ottoman Empire. This experience would shape his worldview and inform his future actions. Despite the danger, Vlad's time as a hostage was also a period of education and cultural enrichment. He learned Turkish and was exposed to the customs and traditions of the Ottoman court. But the seeds of hatred and resentment had already been sown, and would one day bear fruit in the form of his brutal campaigns against the Ottomans. Vlad's experiences as a hostage would also shape his views on power and loyalty. He saw firsthand the brutal methods used by the Ottomans to maintain their power, and he learned from their example. The young prince would go on to use similar tactics to achieve his own goals, earning him a reputation as a ruthless and cunning leader. When Vlad was finally released from Ottoman captivity, he returned to Wallachia a changed man. His experiences had hardened him, and he was determined to reclaim his family's throne and defend his people against the Ottoman Empire. But the path to power would be fraught with danger, and Vlad would stop at nothing to achieve his goals. The stage was set for a bloody and brutal conflict, one that would see Vlad face off against his enemies and rivals in a struggle for power and survival. The making of a monster was almost complete, and the world would soon tremble at the name of Vlad the Impaler. Vlad's family history was marked by blood and betrayal. His father, Vlad II Dracul, had been a member of the Order of the Dragon, a chivalric order dedicated to fighting the Ottoman Empire. But he had also been known for his ruthlessness and cunning, traits that would be passed down to his son. Vlad's mother, Eupraxia of Moldavia, was a member of the noble house of Bogdan Muzad. She was known for her intelligence and beauty, but also for her cunning and ambition. These traits would be passed down to her son, and would shape his future actions. Vlad's childhood was marked by turmoil and conflict. He was constantly surrounded by the threat of war and betrayal, and he learned to be cunning and ruthless from a young age. These traits would serve him well in his future struggles for power, but they would also contribute to his downfall. As Vlad navigated the complex web of politics and power struggles, he would be forced to make difficult choices and confront his own demons. Would he emerge as a hero, or would he succumb to the darkness that had consumed his family for so long? The years passed and Vlad grew into a strong and capable leader. He was determined to reclaim his family's throne and defend his people against the Ottoman Empire. But the road to power would be fraught with danger, and Vlad would have to use all his cunning and ruthlessness to achieve his goals. The Ottoman Empire was a formidable foe, and Vlad would have to be clever and resourceful if he was to outmaneuver them. But he was determined to succeed no matter the cost. As Vlad's power grew, so did his ambition. He began to see himself as a leader destined for greatness, and he would stop at nothing to achieve his goals. But his methods would become increasingly brutal, and his reputation would begin to spread throughout the land. The people of Wallachia would come to know Vlad as a ruthless and cunning leader, a man who would do whatever it took to maintain his power and defend his people. But they would also fear him, and the legend of Vlad the Impaler would begin to grow. After his release from Ottoman captivity, Vlad returned to Wallachia, determined to reclaim his family's throne and defend his people against the Ottoman Empire. But the path to power would be fraught with danger, and Vlad would have to use all his cunning and ruthlessness to achieve his goals. Vlad's first challenge was to consolidate his power and eliminate his rivals. He began by forming alliances with powerful nobles and military leaders, and by secretly gathering an army of loyal supporters. Vlad's methods were brutal and efficient. He would stop at nothing to eliminate his enemies, and his reputation as a ruthless leader began to spread throughout the land. But he also had a charismatic presence, and his people began to rally behind him. As Vlad's power grew, so did his ambition. He began to see himself as a leader destined for greatness, and he would stop at nothing to achieve his goals. The Ottoman Empire was his greatest enemy, and he would have to be clever and resourceful if he was to outmaneuver them. Vlad's strategy was to use guerrilla warfare to wear down the Ottoman Empire. He would launch surprise attacks on Ottoman forces, and then retreat into the mountains to regroup and plan his next move. The Ottoman Empire was a formidable foe, but Vlad was determined to defeat them. He would use every trick in the book to outmaneuver them, and he would show no mercy to his enemies. As Vlad's power grew, so did his reputation. He became known as a cunning and ruthless leader, a man who would stop at nothing to achieve his goals. But he also had a sense of justice, and he would do whatever it took to protect his people. The legend of Vlad the Impaler was beginning to grow, and the people of Wallachia would come to fear and respect him. But Vlad's greatest challenge was yet to come, and he would have to use all his cunning and strength to survive. Vlad's military campaigns against the Ottoman Empire were marked by brutality and cunning. He would often use tactics such as impaling his enemies on stakes, a gruesome practice that would earn him his nickname Vlad the Impaler. But Vlad's methods were not just about terrorizing his enemies. He was a skilled military strategist, and he knew how to use the land to his advantage. He would often lure Ottoman forces into ambushes, where they would be cut down by his soldiers. Despite being outnumbered, Vlad's forces were highly motivated and well-trained. They were fighting for their homes and their families, and they would stop at nothing to defend them. The Ottoman Empire was a vast and powerful force, but Vlad was determined to resist its advances. He would use every trick in the book to outmaneuver them, and he would show no mercy to his enemies. As Vlad's power grew, so did his reputation. He became known as a brilliant military strategist and a ruthless leader. But he also had a sense of justice, and he would do whatever it took to protect his people. Vlad's legend was spreading far and wide, and people were beginning to talk about him as a hero. But Vlad knew that his work was far from over. He still had to defeat the Ottoman Empire and secure his throne. Vlad's next move would be crucial. He had to defeat the Ottoman Empire's vassal states and secure his borders. He began to make alliances with other European powers, and he launched a series of military campaigns against the Ottomans. The stage was set for a final confrontation between Vlad and the Ottoman Empire. The fate of Wallachia and the fate of Europe hung in the balance. Would Vlad emerge victorious, or would he fall to the might of the Ottoman Empire? Vlad's reign as the ruler of Wallachia was marked by brutality and terror. He used impalement as a form of punishment, and his victims numbered in the thousands. But Vlad's methods were not just about terrorizing his enemies. He believed that the ends justified the means, and he was willing to do whatever it took to maintain his power and protect his people. Vlad's reputation as a ruthless leader spread far and wide, and he became known as the Impaler. People trembled at the mention of his name, and his enemies lived in fear of his wrath. But Vlad's reign was not without its challenges. He faced opposition from within his own ranks, and he had to constantly look over his shoulder to avoid being overthrown. Despite these challenges, Vlad remained in power, and his legend continued to grow. He became a mythical figure, a symbol of terror and power. But as the years passed, Vlad's grip on reality began to slip. He became increasingly paranoid and isolated, and his actions became more and more erratic. Vlad's relationships with his nobles and boyars began to deteriorate, and he became increasingly isolated. He surrounded himself with loyalists and informants, and he ruled through fear and intimidation. The Impaler's reign was marked by a series of brutal purges, as Vlad eliminated anyone who he perceived as a threat to his power. His methods were merciless and his victims were countless. Despite his brutal methods, Vlad's reign was also marked by a sense of order and stability. He was a strong leader who enforced the law and maintained order in his kingdom. But Vlad's sense of justice was often arbitrary and brutal. He would often impale people for minor offenses, and his courts were notorious for their harsh sentences. Vlad's use of impalement as a form of punishment was a deliberate strategy to intimidate his enemies and maintain control over his kingdom. He believed that by demonstrating his power and ruthlessness, he could prevent opposition and rebellion. The image of Vlad sitting on his throne, surrounded by the bodies of his victims, was a powerful symbol of his authority and control. It was a reminder to all who dared to oppose him of the fate that awaited them. As Vlad's reign continued, his legend grew. He became a figure of fascination and terror, a symbol of the brutal and arbitrary power of the medieval prince. But Vlad's reign was not without its challenges. He faced opposition from the Ottoman Empire, and he had to constantly defend his kingdom against their attacks. Despite these challenges, Vlad remained in power, and his legend continued to grow. He became one of the most feared and respected leaders in Eastern Europe, and his name was whispered in awe and terror by those who knew of him. But Vlad's greatest challenge was yet to come. His enemies were gathering, and his kingdom was about to be plunged into chaos and destruction. The Ottoman Empire, still reeling from Vlad's previous victories, launched a final campaign to crush him once and for all. The Sultan himself led the army, determined to eliminate the rebellious prince. Vlad, aware of the impending attack, prepared his defenses. He knew that his kingdom was no match for the might of the Ottoman Empire, but he was determined to fight to the end. The battle was fierce and bloody, with both sides suffering heavy losses. Vlad's army fought bravely, but they were vastly outnumbered. As the day wore on, it became clear that the Ottomans would emerge victorious. Vlad knew that he was beaten. He saw the writing on the wall and knew that his time was running out. He made a desperate bid to escape, but it was too late. Vlad was captured by the Ottomans and taken to the Sultan's tent. The Sultan himself interrogated Vlad, demanding to know how he had managed to resist the Ottoman Empire for so long. Vlad's response was defiant, and he proudly proclaimed his victories against the Ottomans. The Sultan, impressed by Vlad's bravery, offered him a choice: conversion to Islam or death. Vlad refused to renounce his faith, and his fate was sealed. The Sultan, impressed by Vlad's bravery, ordered his execution. Vlad's head was impaled on a stake, a gruesome display of the Sultan's power. And so the Impaler's reign came to an end. His legacy would live on, a testament to the brutality and cunning of the medieval prince. His name would become synonymous with terror and power, and his legend would haunt the imagination of Europe for centuries to come. The final battle between Vlad and the Ottoman Empire was a brutal and bloody one. The two armies clashed in a frenzy of steel and blood, with both sides determined to emerge victorious. Vlad, determined to defend his kingdom to the end, led the charge himself. He fought bravely, cutting down any Ottoman soldier who dared to stand in his way. Despite being vastly outnumbered, Vlad's army held their ground, fighting valiantly against the Ottoman Empire's elite forces. The battle raged on for hours, with both sides suffering heavy losses. As the sun began to set, Vlad knew that the end was near. He rallied his troops for one final charge, determined to go down fighting. The final charge was a desperate bid for victory, with Vlad and his men fighting with every ounce of strength they had left. The Ottomans were caught off guard, and for a moment, it seemed as though Vlad might emerge victorious. But it was not to be. Vlad was surrounded by Ottoman soldiers and, after a fierce fight, was killed. His body was later found among the dead, his sword still clutched in his hand. The Ottoman Empire claimed victory, but at great cost. They had lost many good men, and Vlad had taken a heavy toll on their army. The battle marked the end of an era, and the beginning of a new chapter in the history of Wallachia. Vlad's legacy lived on, however. He was remembered as a brave and cunning leader, who had fought against overwhelming odds to defend his kingdom. His reputation as the Impaler would spread far and wide, striking fear into the hearts of his enemies. Today, Vlad is remembered as a national hero in Romania, a symbol of resistance against the Ottoman Empire. His legacy continues to inspire people to this day, a reminder of the power of courage and determination in the face of overwhelming odds. But Vlad's legacy is also complex, marked by violence and brutality. His methods were extreme and his victims were countless. He was a product of his time, a man of violence and war. And yet, despite the brutality of his methods, Vlad's legacy endures. He remains a fascinating figure, a symbol of the complexities and contradictions of human nature. Vlad's story is a complex and multifaceted one, full of contradictions and paradoxes. He was a hero and a villain, a patriot and a tyrant. His legacy continues to inspire and horrify us to this day. As we look back on Vlad's life and reign, we are reminded of the complexities of human nature. We see a man who was driven by a desire to protect his people and defend his kingdom, but who also committed atrocities that cannot be justified. Vlad's story is a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power and the importance of accountability. It is also a testament to the enduring power of human courage and determination. As we reflect on Vlad's legacy, we are forced to confront the darker aspects of human nature. We see the devastating consequences of violence and aggression, and the enduring impact of trauma and suffering. And yet, even in the midst of darkness, there is hope. For Vlad's story is also a testament to the human spirit's capacity for resilience and perseverance. Despite the odds against him, Vlad fought on, driven by his conviction and determination. As we close this chapter on Vlad's life and reign, we are left with more questions than answers. What drives a person to commit such atrocities? How do we reconcile the contradictions of human nature? These questions may never be fully answered, but they are worth asking nonetheless. For in the end, it is through exploring the complexities of human nature that we may come to a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us. Thanks for joining me on this journey through the life and reign of Vlad the Impaler. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more historical tales and in-depth explorations. Let's keep the conversation going in the comments below. What do you think about Vlad's legacy? Share your thoughts and let's dive deeper into history together.